Chapter 472. Shocking revelation. Back when Godfrey held Ken, none of them realized something invisible moved downstairs. It had been standing idly below the ladder all this while, but suddenly moved. Each step took this invisible being straight to Kazuo's room. Then, the shoji door slid open, revealing a large room. It didn't have much, just a bed with Kazuo lying on top. The moment the shoji door slid open, Kazuo smirked. Did they eat? He tilted his head toward the door, but there was no one there, just darkness. Kazuo sat up. Yuna, he frowned. His window was wide open, and the soft moonlight flooded his room. The corridor was quite dark, but the soft glow should have allowed him to see whoever opened that door. It will soon be time for the sacrifice, Yuna. How about you agree to get married to me? I can protect you. He raised an eyebrow. Yuna, Kazuo yelled, assuming she was taking precautionary steps to ensure he didn't do anything funny. This stupid woman. Kazuo rose and went to light up his lantern. The moment it came on, he felt the light of the moon darken. Kazuo slowly turned his head and saw a towering golden knight whose helmet had no eye holes. Kazuo froze for a moment, then collapsed, almost sitting on the lantern. His heart almost burst. All he could think of was running as goosebumps flared up all over his body. As he dashed for the exit, Ballista swung his ironclad foot, sweeping Kazuo's feet from under him. Then he lifted his hand, the knuckles of his golden gauntlet reflecting in Kazuo's eyes. The man still hadn't fallen. His body was still midair as that blow tore through his skull. Then he dropped, a hole where his face once was. He threw an arrow crackling with lightning into the chest of the corpse, scorching it until all that remained were scattered pieces of his skeleton. The shoji door shut and Ballista went back to his post, silent like he didn't even leave. At the first floor, Godfrey leaned on the windowsill. I had my night deal with him. Emma's mouth was open for 2 seconds before she closed it and simply nodded. Ken glanced at Yuna. What do we do about her? If you kill her, you will have to kill everyone in this town. So what? They're not even people. Emma scowled. They're like NPCs in games. Dungeons just got bigger and decided to create people to make things more competitive. What Emma said made Godfrey's eyes widen subconsciously. NPCs. Why did this sting? All of a sudden, Gwen Pendragon's statement about him being fake resurfaced in his mind. The mana tree could manipulate a lot of aspects and concepts to birth things. It made this dungeon. It gave birth to him. Didn't that also make him like these people? Or was he superior because he had a real father? Dungeons are not games, Emma. These people are not NPCs, because if they are, they're better. NPC means non-playable character. Wouldn't that mean you're a playable character? Then, who's your player? Godfrey tilted his head toward Emma, his eyes slightly narrow. Kane. At that moment, Emma's irises became crimson. She lifted her hands, but 2 voices came out of her mouth, her female voice and a male's. I'm here to help. You wouldn't have gotten this far this fast if I didn't bring along a tracker. Emma's eyes went down to the katana at her throat, and then she looked at Ken. Drop that, will you? A thin cut appeared on Emma's throat as Ken was ready to make the final cut, and Emma was just a top-level paragon. Her abilities were nothing before Ken, even when Kane took over. Don't do it, Ken. Godfrey approached and lowered the katana while staring straight into Emma's eyes. The one time I do something without my friends, you're there. Emma smiled, then shrugged. I'm taking care of you after all. Godfrey was already irritated, but he hid all that behind a smile. What do you want? I just wanted to figure it out. How much do you already know about me? You've been too elusive for me to brush all that aside as a coincidence. Tell me, how did you figure it all out? Do you know what you've just done? Godfrey frowned. Oh, I do. I sold myself for a fair price. Now you've confirmed I see you through Gabriel, but I've also confirmed that you're no longer the naive boy anymore. You know about my clones. I figured some people should have known by now, though, but not you, Godfrey. Emma walked straight to the window. You're still too hot-headed, and I don't want us to fight, not yet. Ken glanced at both of them, still trying to make sense of what was going on. I'll admit I respected your pride when you didn't come to me for help. I could have helped you with your friend, Isaac. Now the poor boy will live on, knowing every single second is a countdown to his rigid end. Who knows, maybe he's already marked it on a calendar. Emma glanced at Godfrey, who didn't say anything. I felt a sting, little Frey. Fake, he whispered. Fake, fake, you're fake. The dawn of life didn't create you, it created this Japanese boy, but not you. No, you were born after life was done with its original blueprint. You might have all this talent, but it's all fake, it's just a privilege. Your life is a script with no definite end. Same as you, I heard you weren't real either. Godfrey stood at the other end of the window. Emma grinned. You've heard quite a lot. What are we? What is the relationship we have? It resembles that of a protagonist and an antagonist. Can't you see that? Can't you see the script that has been played 1,000,000,000 times? The boy behind us is a true talent. We're not. We have too much advantage, but what use is all that when there are shackles on our necks? Emma looked at the moon. One day I shall dominate everything. I shall break the confines of control. One day I will kill you and every single being that worships you. I hate you more than you hate me. My hate for you precedes your birth, but I do well holding it back. You should do the same. And do me one favor, don't die in this dungeon. Emma turned to Ken. If it comes to it, let him take your place. Godfrey was expressionless. Emma approached Ken, then placed her hand on his shoulder. Then she leaned forward. You are confused. Let me educate you. You see, you and the rest of every single true human on Earth have been reduced to nothing but chess pieces on a board. This confusion you feel now, it's the confusion of an inferior before the matters of the superior. Ken tightened his grip around his katana. Emma noticed his action but did nothing. Have you not heard of me? Emma turned to Godfrey, then back at Ken. She took a step back, as if assessing him with cold, crimson eyes that had this condescending glow. I am Cain. Yes, the one you sheep fear. I am the one who altered the course of history, who began the hate between humanoid and beast summoners. I alone split humanity. They try to erase me, yet their actions drive me deeper and deeper into society, and now it whispers my name. I am in every street, every district, every nation. Her smile slowly grew wider while she maintained eye contact with Ken. As his expression changed, her smile grew wider. Shocked. The sound of Ken's katana leaving the sheath resounded in the room, but before it could touch Emma's neck, Godfrey stopped it. His hand was covered in a golden gauntlet wrapped around the blade. Emma sighed. Oh, I forgot to present the last part of my resume. I'm also a master of lies. Don't listen to him. Cain is alive. Ken faced Godfrey. He is, Godfrey replied, but he's not here, he's just using this body. While saying that, he lowered the katana. Emma went back to the wall and folded her arms. Harvest time is near, little Frey. I truly wish you could win, but I know how this story plays out. The crimson light died out. Emma blinked, then touched her neck. Her eyes widened. What in the world? How did I get injured on my neck? Ken took a step back, then more steps. His eyes widened to the core. Godfrey, on the other hand, went straight to the window. Just now, Cain had managed to confuse him. Cain had long gotten what he wanted by revealing himself, which was confirming that he and his friends knew Gabriel was working for him. Cain also wanted to make him believe Gabriel was also a clone in order to hide the fact that he had 4 bodies. Aside from that, he had spent the other time sowing confusion, so thoroughly that he confused not just Ken, but also Godfrey. All Cain did right after having a conversation with him was so an existential crisis in Ken, which would force him into distrusting those around him, forcing him into a state where he would be all alone. Right now, Ken might not even trust him. Emma had a wound with no answer to it, and she might be suspecting Ken. The team was about to blow up. Ken might not be able to keep it all together and lash out at Emma. Emma might also think something was wrong with Ken and attack. Whoever survived would aim at him. What then did Kane truly want? Didn't he just say he wanted him to clear this dungeon? Godfrey folded his fingers into a fist. Kane was a master of lies and deceit. His true plan was to restrain Godfrey's number of allies, and in this case, Ken was a potential ally with a massive talent pool. That's why he came. He noticed Ken in a way sort of idolized Godfrey. He wanted that gone. Godfrey held back the urge to curse as he swiftly spun around. Right at that moment, Emma's sharp, beautiful, upturned eyes locked on Ken. "Did you cut me because I wanted this woman dead?" In that moment, a diagram popped up, and Yoru, the massive bear, erupted from behind Ken. The floorboards shattered under its weight, forcing Ken, the bear, Emma, and Yuna to the ground floor. They all plummeted and crashed with a loud sound. Yet Ken's katana was already out of its sheath, and he swung it backward, aiming at Yoru's neck. Meanwhile, Emma lunged at him. Her hands had transformed into a bear's paws with deadly claws. Fangs equally grew out of her mouth. There was also a white phantom duplicate of Yoru coming from another direction, one claw raised to slam Ken down. It was obvious Emma was a wild young woman who would lunge at a demigod summoner the moment she noticed the individual threatened her life. She had the experience to back it all up, but against a demigod, the gap was quite large. She was banking on Ken's inexperience, but Godfrey already knew Ken's reaction speed and lethality were his forte. But before blood could spill, Godfrey's eyes gleamed as he activated Will Freeze, pausing everyone right before they made contact with each other. He squatted on the first floor, looking down through the massive hole that took nearly half of the floor. Using his telekinetic skill, he forced them apart, then released his first skill. Will Freeze was a demigod skill, and it took a good amount of mana, an amount he wasn't willing to spend. Emma Ken calmed down. His calm voice rang out. The sound of the townsfolk's clamor from afar echoed. "Hinata is already at the stake and you're fighting. Emma, I'll explain what happened after this dungeon. Ken, just do as you were ordered. She is not your target." Both of them looked at him. Outside, Hinata was dragged onto the snow-covered field and held to a wooden pole, while another man tied her hands as others gathered sticks around her feet. They were almost done when the people from the town began to emerge with torches in their hands. Hinata glanced at them, then looked around. At first she saw nothing else in the darkness, but then she spotted a woman in the distance. She was clothed in white, and her face was also painted white. There was a mask with a face strapped to the right side of her face. Her eyes were lined with crimson. Everyone began to retreat when they spotted her standing in the distance. As the two-faced lady drew closer, she removed the white cloak she wore, revealing her crimson kimono. Her black hair was allowed to flow down to her neck, and her forehead down to her nose was painted crimson, with a faint golden marking on her forehead. It was mixed with red. Then the other part of her face was painted white down to her right exposed shoulder, but her lips were bright crimson. The closer she came, the farther the townsfolk distanced themselves from Hinata. Only one man stood there with a torch. He went on his knees when the two-faced lady was close. She wrapped her hand around the wood, one finger after another, before lifting it up. The man fled as the two-faced lady slowly turned to Hinata. But at that moment, an antelope with two huge spiked horns that curved backward emerged from a portal. It had hind legs that seemed borrowed from a grasshopper, and its tail ended with wings harder than any known steel. It flashed forward and swung its tail, which grew in length. The feathered tail acted like a fan blade. It took off the two-faced lady's head and left a thin trail of blood in the air. Then the chimeric antelope slammed its horns into the headless body. The spikes on its horns suddenly grew at the faint touch of blood. Before the eyes of the townsfolk, bone spikes tore through the two-faced lady's headless body. Screams erupted in the next moment. People were about to scamper when the head lying on the floor screamed, "Do not take another step." The headless body grabbed the antelope as crimson-backed centipedes burst out of her flesh, latching onto the antelope. Hinata retrieved her summon. That move freed the two-faced lady. She staggered backward, but what looked like an unconscious move took her straight to where her head was, and she picked it up, then reconnected her head. All the wounds closed up, and her crimson lips tilted upwards. Hinata tore off the rope that bound her and took the torch the two-faced lady dropped. She resummoned her chimeric beast. "Let's see how tough you are once I set you on fire." The two-faced lady smirked. "I've never seen this before. How do you control that beast and where do you keep it?" She tilted her head. Hinata's antelope charged at the two-faced lady, but she leaped, kicked the head of the antelope, forcing it backward as she somersaulted several times and landed. This time around, she pulled out a bamboo flute from her bosom and swiftly began to blow it. The entire townsfolk screamed and fell on the ground, consumed with fear, but none of them was affected. Only Hinata collapsed and began to vomit blood. The two-faced lady increased the intensity, and Hinata's throat bulged as a huge centipede forced its way out and coiled around her neck. It dug all its sharp legs into the soft flesh of her neck, while aiming to bite and pump its venom into her head at the command of the one who held the flute. Hinata's antelope shot forward, but the two-faced lady played another tune, forcing Hinata to scream as another centipede forced its way out of her back. Blood poured from Hinata's orifices as she ordered her antelope to stand down. The pain she felt made her unable to reason for a moment. Just as the two-faced lady slowly rose to her feet, an arrow suddenly tore through her throat and came out of her mouth. A purple light flashed in the darkness, and Godfrey appeared before her, grabbed the arrow that was about to fly into the distance at its midsection. Then, while it crackled with lightning, he plunged it through her abdomen. It burst a huge hole through her abdomen. The golden lightning crept to other parts of her body, frying her from the inside out. She turned pitch black and collapsed on the ground, twitching as lightning kept crackling. All the townsfolk couldn't believe their eyes. Ken and Emma hurried over on the backs of their summons. Godfrey picked up the flute, while Ken and Emma faced Hinata. "Ken," Hinata whispered. Ken's breath shook. His eyes reddened as he swiftly decapitated the centipedes at her throat and back. Hinata collapsed on the ground, tears brimming at the corners of her eyes. "It's over," she smiled while crying at the same time. Godfrey stared at the flute in his hand, then remembered Yuna's story. Then his eyes went to Emma. "There's something else, and another, I don't think it's Av." A soothing flute sounded. It wasn't ferocious like the two-faced ladies, but calm, like an ancient man playing a calm melody to soothe his boredom. But centipedes shot out of Hinata's body with so much ferocity, she was torn apart. Over 6 huge centipedes lunged at Ken. They were fast, but his draw speed was faster. One swing was all it took, and all the centipedes were cut 3 times. What everyone saw was one swing, but Ken had swung his katana 3 times, yet their eyes couldn't follow, not even Emma's. "Arg!" With a yell, Ken cut off Hinata's head from her mangled body because she was still alive. This was horrible. The pain he saw a fellow human going through snapped him. Way of flames. A thought crossed his mind, and a large amount of fire burst out of his curved blade. It burned bright under the night sky as the samurai kid tilted his head toward the townsfolk. When they saw the glowing left eye in his side profile, everyone began to retreat. Some fled into the town. Ken, Godfrey muttered. The 17-year-old paused, his hand trembling immensely. They're the cause, can't you see that? They're the victims, can't you see that? Godfrey responded. It's the same pattern. You told me there were always people burned at stakes. It's all been a game. This town will perish like all the others you've seen. Let's get to the source, the dungeon boss. While Godfrey spoke, Emma suddenly exclaimed, "The two-faced lady, she's gone." Godfrey looked behind him. He finally confirmed it. Whatever they were facing was a master of stealth. Even when his senses were high, he still couldn't sense when the two-faced lady, whom he assumed dead, left. Only sight mattered here. This was also why the centipedes could only be spotted with the eyes and couldn't be felt. "I'll kill her," Ken declared. "There are two mana signatures much stronger than hers, but I can also sense her. Yoru will chase after the woman. Follow him," Emma said as her bear ran in a specific direction toward the horizon. Ken summoned a Sahi, then used Echo to manifest another horse. Both of them followed the bear. "I can only guess the two stronger mana signatures are coming here," Godfrey said while staring at Emma. "Just one and it's big," she said while retreating. "Don't die, I need you to feel safe." At that moment, a loud screech pierced the cold night air. That two-faced lady had called something, and it wasn't small in the slightest. A golden diagram flared up and Solstice stepped out. Another also flared up, but Solstice tilted his head in a bow toward Godfrey. "Let me handle this, my king." Godfrey paused, closed down the portal while assessing Solstice. "We don't have time to waste." "Very well," he sighed. A huge centipede appeared at the horizon. It had a hard, crimson carapace with black legs. The length of its head alone was greater than an adult male. Its legs were like knives, hundreds of them piercing the snow and grass as it crept toward them with great speed. "I have grown, my king. My monument states my strength has increased from 34.5 to 37. Once I activate my human dragon state, I shall attain the strength I had at my peak." Solstice went on one knee. "A knight's glory is in battle." "Let me see what you can do then," Godfrey said. Of course, Solstice would say glory. That was where he thrived. Honor came second. His increase in tier came as a surprise to Godfrey, but he understood it from the accumulation of battles he had been fighting for a while. The sounds of blades leaving their sheaths pierced Godfrey's ears as Solstice drew his swords, then turned and walked toward the centipede. It was much closer now and looked much bigger. This beast's entire length exceeded 200 feet. For a centipede, this was deeply grotesque and disturbing. "One night, for our sake, Godfrey summoned them all," Emma yelled from afar. She wanted nothing more than to pound Godfrey's head. She would have summoned the entire gang and whatever more she could get, then beat this thing until it was beyond death. Solstice was so small, and that centipede was incredibly massive. She placed her hand on her chest. At least Solstice could turn into a dragon. He could swoop into the air and burn that thing to a crisp. All she hoped was that the centipede would burn in peace and not have some stupid fire-resistant armor. She had to think like that, because the armor of that centipede looked durable enough to tank explosive attacks. On the other hand, a golden fog burst out of Solstice, swallowing his surroundings. Solstice walked out from the other side of the fog, but he wasn't the same anymore. This was his blackout state, his true form in blackout state. Blackout state was a state that defined when a knight had unleashed their monster side. And right now, Godfrey and Emma were witnesses to the true form of Solstice half-man. A pair of large bat-like wings sprouted from his back, and two horns grew out of his head, curving outward before spiraling toward the sky. From his waist down, he was covered in golden scales, down his digitigrade legs that ended in 3 claws, while a long tail swept the floor. It ended in what looked like a sun-heated short blade. Solstice still had a breastplate, but it wasn't as bulky, and his face was visible. His white hair danced in the wind, generated by his transformation as his draconic eyes, pulsing like the sun, locked on the centipede. Solstice's arms were spread wide, his clawed fingers wrapped around his swords, as a flap of his wings hurtled him skyward. Solstice felt the warmth of sunfire inside of him. In this state, it couldn't damage him, no matter how he used it. And so he took a deep breath. His mind's eye flashed with images as it all felt nostalgic. He was in this state when he died after he had burnt down a horde, an orc horde allied with trolls and elves. He was the sun, one that basked in so much glory it radiated off him. The law of life stated that that which rose would eventually fall. A newborn would eventually become old. Life would always end in death. The fall was inevitable, but he was the sun. He was that being that fell and rose again, that vanished in the night and awoke in the morning. Life itself had acknowledged him, it expected him. That law had no hold on the ever-burning sun. So how come? Solstice looked at himself. The last time he was in this state, there were spears, ballistic bolts, and lots of arrows poking through him. Tempest had fallen, so his halo no longer provided healing. He was the chief knight, and he held the tattered, half-burnt flag of the order as the last man standing. A sight similar to the day the sun dragon fell. Blood, death, and fire were everywhere. The question rang once more. How come the sun could not rise once more? That day, when his knees slammed into the ground, the sun hid itself, shrouding the Patan world in darkness. That darkness was an announcement that the sun had fallen. With a loud screech, the centipede lifted up its body, and what it received was a dragon's roar from Solstice. But what left his mouth wasn't just sound, sunfire billowed out. It scorched the centipede's head, forcing it to screech. It clearly had never felt such heat. Solstice's wings propelled him downward, straight toward the centipede's open mouth. Before Solstice could fall into that abyss, he plunged his swords into the top and lower jaw, suspending himself, then breathed fire straight down the centipede's maw. The fire roared into the centipede's insides and burst out of the gaps in its carapace. With a screech that grew faint by the second, the centipede's collapse shook the earth. Solstice pulled out his swords, then sheathed them slowly while his expression was quite complicated. He was so caught up in his memories, he felt nothing from this fight. There was no glory, no well-earned one. Of course, what else did he expect from an oversized bug? While he walked back to Godfrey in disappointment, Imas stood rooted to the ground. "You don't look so happy. Didn't you want to fight it alone?" Godfrey crossed his arms. Solstice nodded like a well-convinced man, who ended up realizing his decision wasn't that great at the end of the day. If he had fought with another knight, then he would have easily blamed the other. Now it just hurt. Staring at Solstice's expression, Godfrey couldn't stifle his emotions and burst into laughter. He quickly retrieved him before he offended his chief knight. In the castle, Solstice sat on his throne. It doesn't even have a core that would have been of use to the king. What a waste! Sound of horseshoes pounding the snow-covered ground as two horsemen followed a bear rang in the forest path. They didn't even go too far when there was no more sight of snow. Instead, the trees opened up to a massive swampland that stretched as far as the eyes could see. There were interconnecting wooden bridges built just above the swamp, and the houses here were so few he could barely count 10. Each of them was built above the swamp. Ken doubted the occupants were still alive. He and Asahi spotted the two-faced lady running on the swamp. She can't move underground anymore. Ken unsheathed his katana and gave chase. Both he and his summon, Asahi, kicked their horses as they ran on the wooden bridges at great speed. The large gap that the two-faced lady had between them shrank in a matter of seconds. Asahi pulled out his 3-meter-long bow, took an arrow from his quiver, and drew it. The samurai's eyes tracked the two-faced lady as she stumbled through the swamp. Then he released the arrow. In what seemed like an instant, the arrow tore through the chest of the two-faced lady. It pulled her feet from the ground, threw her a dozen feet forward, and she landed headfirst in the swamp. Suddenly she began to laugh. As she laughed, men in black came out from those houses. Some held katana, some held spears. Almost 20 of them charged toward Asahi and Ken. Some ran through the swamp, others on the narrow wooden bridges. "Ken," Asahi said as he dismounted and placed his hand on the hilt of his katana. On the other hand, Ken jumped from the echo of Asahi's horse and mounted the real one. The three-headed black horse neighed loudly, then charged toward the armed men on the left. These ones were on the wooden bridges, and some of them had wooden round shields. The horse ran with such speed that the wooden bridge shattered the moment its hooves made contact with it. But the horse was fast enough to move beyond that spot. Two men were able to jump out of the way in time, but the others were rammed through by the horse. Due to the horse's insane speed, 4 men tore apart upon impact. Their shields didn't matter. It lifted up its forelimbs while neighing loudly. The eyes of all 3 heads were staring at 2 men paralyzed with fear at what had happened. Unfortunately for them, the horse crushed their skulls. Ken leaped from the horse, slicing one man into 2, then he plunged his katana through the throat of the other. "Arg!" A loud scream made Ken tilt his head toward the right. There, he saw Asahi under the moonlight, surrounded by a dozen men. One in their midst struggled to move away from Asahi, but it seemed his femur had been broken. Others lunged for the samurai at the same time. Asahi evaded the first, sliced off the head of the second, then spun his waist and kicked the first. Asahi's foot tore off his head from his neck, and that head slammed into another man's head. The force broke the third man's neck, killing him on the spot. The fourth man only reacted when Asahi's katana had sliced through his abdomen. His blood trailed the katana, whose blade reflected the soft moonlight. Asahi spun the katana over his head as he shifted himself from the path of a spear. Then he swung down. His slanted slash cut through the man's shoulder and came out at his hip. While the fifth man fell apart, Asahi's katana went back to its sheath. His eyes lit up, crackling with red lightning. Way of the red lightning. Lightning sparked in the samurai's eyes and he moved, leaving behind an afterimage. He appeared behind the other men and flicked the droplets of blood that managed to stain his blade as 7 men, crackling with lightning, staggered. Some divided into 2, a few lost their heads. Asahi exhaled slowly, then turned to Ken's direction. Seeing the young man staring at him, Asahi smiled a bit, brought his legs together and bowed. The moment he did that, the two-faced lady burst out of the swamp water, daggers in her hands as she swung them down at the samurai's neck, a part that wasn't protected by his armor, especially in his current position. She didn't see the samurai's right foot pulling back. The swamp water stirred, then splashed violently as Asahi dragged one foot back, pulling his head away fast enough for the two-faced lady to miss. Asahi's katana was already drawn. Red lightning crackled on the blade, down to the samurai's arms as he swung it down so fast the two-faced lady felt nothing. Asahi took a few bold steps and stood before her. She remained in the same spot. Something told her the moment she moved, it would be unpleasant. There were bolts of lightning waiting to explode within her. They just waited for the slightest movement. But when flames from Asahi's katana reflected in her eyes, the two-faced lady was about to propel herself back. But lightning bolts ran wild like a switch had just been turned on. They snaked around her centipede-infested body as she began to split. But then Asahi's second cut went through her neck. So her divided body fell before her head followed, but he caught it before it touched the swamp and pierced his burning katana through it. The head screamed as it was burnt. Centipedes fell from her neck into the swamp until all that remained of her head was a scorched skull. Asahi then plunged his katana into the water, and red lightning burst out, killing all the centipedes that could be in the swamp. The samurai went back to the wooden bridge with mud-stained armor. He slowly walked toward Ken, then bowed once more. "We may return, Lord Ken." "I have a long way to go," Ken sighed. Asahi chuckled softly. "You're a natural talent. Your speed is quite remarkable already, and your discipline amazes me. You will surpass me as soon as you learn how to harness the power of other stances." Ken scratched his helmet. His eyes flickered as he remembered the pain at the back of his right hip. That would forever make him flawed. One mistake and he would be dead against a seasoned opponent. "I wish what you say is true, Asahi," Ken muttered. Finally, Emma rose to her feet when she saw Ken riding toward them with her bear at his side. Emma raced toward Yoru and embraced the bear. As she kissed and caressed her summon, Ken reined in his horse, descended, then looked at Godfrey, who sat on a huge centipede, examining the flute the two-faced lady dropped. "How did it go?" "Asahi killed her," Ken replied, his eyes trailing from Godfrey to the huge centipede. Its body could end up as an extremely useful resource, especially in the creation of armor. "The demon's next then," Ken said. Godfrey nodded. "That's why we've been waiting for you. We need Yoru." He looked at Emma, who mounted her bear and approached them. So he rose to his feet. "Yoru has picked up his scent." Godfrey nodded, then manifested an echo of Lament's horse. He couldn't afford to use Solstice in his full dragon form anymore because of the mana it would consume. He was already down quite a bit, and meditation would not be able to cover up for the rate of consumption. All of them rode out. Godfrey and Ken followed behind Emma, whose bear was quite fast for its large, bulky size. Tilting his head toward the horse Godfrey rode, Ken marveled inwardly. His own horse looked thin and menacing, as it was a spirit beast his summon said he found in the spirit world, but this creature Godfrey rode was the very definition of a war horse. It had the perfect muscles, and though it had incredible height, it still didn't lose its perfect build. The armor just made it a bit bulky, but the horse itself was like an athlete at his very peak. It ran effortlessly, and Godfrey leaned forward, his form flawless, like he had been horse riding since he was a kid. A faint smile graced Ken's lips, and he kicked his horse, forcing it to run faster. Emma noticed him catching up to her, so she patted Yoru. "Don't let him catch up, Yoru." Her bear roared in return, then ran with greater speed. In no time, both of them quickly distanced themselves from Godfrey. He lifted an eyebrow, chuckling softly. There was no need to motivate them this time. "All right." Godfrey slowly caressed the horse's neck. "Let's catch up." It neighed as if delighted, then shot forward. Godfrey felt like he was flying as the horse seemed to glide through the snow. It quickly caught up to Emma and Ken, then began to increase its speed. At first, it was behind them, then it ran at the same pace as them. All three of them rode side by side for a moment before Godfrey went ahead. Ken's horse also surpassed Yoru. Both horses seemed to have formed a rivalry as they traversed the expanse so fast. Emma wasn't just left in the dust. She found herself staring at the horizon, all alone in the dark. Emma looked around in disbelief. "Are these boys crazy? I'm the tracker." Her eyes widened in disbelief, then she slapped Yoru. "Why did you allow some horses to outrun you? You've embarrassed us." Yoru forced himself to run faster. The bear panted but kept running, yet the horizon remained empty. Godfrey and Ken were long gone. At a certain point, Emma's hope dwindled. She might have lost them. How could demigods be so foolish? They were still young, but still. How could they leave her all alone in the middle of nowhere? An infected could jump out from anywhere, for all she knew. "I'm just a tracker. These brutes, these." Her eyes brightened when she saw two dark silhouettes at the horizon, two individuals on horses facing each other. The riders were waiting. Emma felt relieved and infuriated at the same time. She could have tracked them, but she would prefer to do that in the daytime than in the middle of the night in an unknown terrain. Yaru might faint, Ken said with genuine concern when he noticed the bears panting. Emma glared at him. You know what? I didn't really expect much from the soldier boy, but you, she snapped toward Godfrey. You speak like someone in his late 20s or even 30s. How could you ride off and forget your tracker? Were you afraid? Godfrey's soft question made Emma exhale gently through her mouth. She had to let out her anger through breathing. Do I look like someone who is afraid of being all alone in the night in the middle of nowhere? Her rhetorical question made Ken glance at Godfrey. Let's go then, Godfrey responded. Although Emma was still fuming, she followed, although they couldn't run anymore because Yoru was exhausted. Sometime later, they found a high ground to rest. Godfrey woke up and found himself on a huge bed, cuddling Isolde, who was still asleep. He blinked, got up from the bed, then entered the bathroom. He went past the huge mirror, paused, then retreated. When he looked into the mirror, what he saw was a shadowy armored figure with bright golden eyes and a golden sword. His eyes narrowed. He slowly bent his head, and the shadowy figure in the mirror did the same thing. I never fell. A voice rang out, and the scene where he defeated the unknown king by throwing him into the rift appeared in the mirror. Godfrey watched as he threw the unknown king into the rift in the hall, but the moment he turned, it wasn't him anymore. He had become the unknown king and walked straight to the throne. The moment the unknown king sat on the throne, the mirror cracked, and as it shattered, a golden-haired young man sat up. He was in an old town that had been covered with grass and mold. One part of the wall had fallen completely, and right there, Ken was training with his katana. You're awake, sleeping beauty. I thought you would be the first to be awake. Emma's voice rang as she approached him with bottled water. Emma crouched, then stretched the water out to him. You look like you had a nightmare. I know that face when I see one, she chortled. Godfrey took the water and silently drank it. Ken has been awake for hours now, and he's been training. Only God knows how he's going to wash away that sweat. Emma sat beside him. I admire his discipline, though. Godfrey looked at Ken, who kept moving. His footwork was exceptional, and the way he swung his katana changed afterward. It was like he altered between stances. He suddenly took a deep breath, took 2 steps back, and slowly lowered his sword. He then took 1 solid step forward, pushed his entire torso in the same direction, and swung his katana upward. A gust of wind burst up from his feet, forming what looked like a wall made of wind. Because of the leaves and the fierce speed of the air gathering there, Godfrey and Emma could clearly see the wind. Ken then swept his leg outward, about to unleash what would seem to be a wind slash. But at that moment, his right leg shook, forcing him to tilt in the wrong direction, shattering his stance. His hand swung back as a way to balance himself, but the wind gathered and the katana shot out, slicing the old structure Godfrey and Emma were in. It divided it into 2 and cut down 3 other structures and mounds. Godfrey squinted as Ken fell on one knee. On the other hand, Emma saw her life flash before her eyes. Why don't you leave the katana swinging to your summon? You're a summoner, not a samurai. You're not supposed to fight with your summon. Godfrey rose to his feet, approached Ken, and stretched out his hand. Ken stared at his hand for a while. He took it, rose to his feet before facing Emma. I'm sorry. He walked away. Don't look at me like that. Emma looked away when she noticed Godfrey's gaze. She closed her eyes like someone who knew she had messed up. It skipped my mind that one of his legs was damaged when I almost lost both of mine, Emma said apologetically as she came out and watched Ken's retreating back view. They continued the journey, riding for hours non-stop until the sun once more began to set. Then they got to the shore of a vast body of water. After an hour's effort of going around, they discovered the boss had to be somewhere on the sea. All three of them, on the backs of their mounts, stood at the shore. "Is it inside the water?" Ken asked. Emma pursed her lips. "I have no idea, but there's no doubt it might be a huge centipede lying inside the water. That woman spoke about a Ronin. The boss of this dungeon can't be a centipede if we go by her tail." Emma turned her head to Godfrey. "What if her tail was a lie? Can any of us fight underwater?" Godfrey looked at both of them. "I've never even jumped into a pool. What makes you think I would dare enter an ocean?" Emma responded. "It's almost dark," Godfrey sighed. "Track another scent, anyone close to the shore. They should have some information for us." "You heard him, Yarrow," Emma whispered to her summon, who began to sniff, then began to run toward the left. Godfrey and Ken quickly followed. A few minutes later, they found a village close to the shore. The village rested beside the gray shoreline, no more than a handful of weathered wooden houses with thatched roofs clustered around narrow dirt paths. Fishing nets hung from bamboo poles to dry in the salty breeze, while small wooden boats bobbed gently against a worn pier. Rows of fish smoked over crackling fires, their scent mingling with the sea air. Beyond the homes, patches of rice fields stretched toward the hills. Aside from the distant cry of gulls and the steady rhythm of waves, the tiny fishing village was wrapped in peaceful silence. "It looks like people still live here," Ken said as they rode down to the village. "It's deserted," Godfrey frowned as he dismounted. Emma and Ken also came down from their mounts. "People clearly stay here, or those fish won't be there." "People or someone." The shoji door of one of the houses slid open, and a man came out with a rake. He held it defensively, eyeing them while trembling at the sight of the size of the creatures these strange individuals rode. Were they gods? Ken's attire looked familiar, but this man was well versed in samurai armor, so he knew Ken's armor was just too advanced for him to be comfortable. What do you want?" "We're looking for the centipede demon. Would you be a kind sir and tell us where he is?" Emma beamed. "We know he was a Ronin, or am I wrong?" Emma watched the man's eyes widen while he lowered his rake. Do you see, ek death? So you know him then." Emma drew close. This made the man lift up his rake once more. "Is the centipede demon in the water?" "What's a Ronin going to do in the water?" the man asked. Emma cleared her throat. "Where is he then?" "On an island far into the Black Sea, but you can't get to him, so don't bother trying. You'll only die in the water." Emma gestured at Godfrey. "You see, my golden-haired friend here has a beast that can fly. We can just fly there." The man lowered his rake and laughed. "Go on then." He gestured for them to leave. "I just pray your corpses don't wash up on my shore. Wash up somewhere else." His response made Emma frown. She looked at the boys, then back at the man. "So we can't fly there?" The man scowled. "There's a gray fog not far into the sea. You can't see it." The man pointed at a pole. "See that pole?" They all looked at it. The pole wasn't more than 20 feet tall. "Anything higher than that and you won't be able to see a thing. It's also quite stormy most times. The waves will kill you. Then there are the centipedes in the water. Just go home." The man closed his door and went back in. It felt like he considered their quest so stupid, to the point that he lost his fear of their mounts. They were too stupid to be feared. Emma returned to Godfrey and Ken. "Black Sea. No flight, centipedes in the water. That demon has made sure nothing will be able to get there. I can't even get into a normal pool. I'd rather die than go into one with centipedes." Ken turned, then pointed at a larger boat. It wasn't that big, but definitely bigger than the other fishing boats. This boat also had a thatched roof and what looked like a small room with a lantern at the front. It looked like it was built for a different purpose other than fishing. "That can be our transport." "Can you move that thing?" Emma asked. Godfrey knew telekinesis could work, but he wasn't really sure that it could cover all aspects when he was in the sea. They needed someone who knew everything about the boat and the sea. And from the look of things, that man also knew about the island, and through him, they had just confirmed that the tale of the centipede demon wasn't just a tale after all. "I'll convince him," Emma said and walked toward the house. "How?" Ken tilted his head. "Leave a woman's secrets, will you, little boy?" She clicked her tongue, got to the shoji door and knocked. The door slid open and the man frowned. "What else do you want?" Emma pursed her lips. "Can we speak alone?" Seeing the man's hesitant face, her eyes glowed. "You see, we're not normal people." The man staggered, and she took that as an invitation to step in. Then she closed the shoji door behind her. "We need to know about that island and that demon so we can stop this plague." When Emma said that, the man squinted. "You think you can stop that demon?" "I don't think so. Those two young men out there can kill that demon. They're much stronger than they look." The man went to a table and sat before it. Emma sat on the other side and placed her hands on the table. "We're the ones risking our lives. All you have to do is lead us to the island." He looked down after she said that. "I left that island when I was just 20. I am Kenji Takeda." Kenji laughed softly when he saw Emma's confused and slightly expectant expression. There was no shock. "I had a feeling you had no idea about the Takeda clan. It's the samurai clan that lived on that island. It was even named after our clan, and I was once the young lord of the Takeda clan before that demon descended." "Is that why you built that boat? For vengeance?" Emma probed. "It killed my parents, poisoned the clan with those centipedes, ravaged the sea with disgusting bugs, and then hid the island in a black fog, ensuring no one could get to it. It has no shred of honor despite its audacious claim of being the most powerful swordsman." Kenji's outburst made Emma speak quickly. "Then help us. We can board your boat and you can take us to the island. You don't have to do anything else." Kenji shook his head. "The Black Sea is too dangerous. It has always been known for being stormy, but with the fog and those centipedes, I won't take my chances with it." "But you've taken it before. That's why you built that boat. This is your last chance to end this demon. People are dying, hundreds of them by the day. You are a samurai, Kenji Takeda." "Once a samurai," he retorted, then folded his arms. Emma came out from the house, exhaling heavily. Then she gazed at the boys who were standing by the shoreline. She walked down to them and placed her hands on her waist when they turned to her. "He's a blind man." What happened to the secrets of a woman? Ken's question almost made Emma lunge at him like a cat. "What did he say?" Godfrey asked as the breeze from the sea made his hair flutter. "Well, he was once a young lord of the samurai clan that lived on the island. He calls it Takeda Island. I think he's stuck between avenging his family and fear." Godfrey tilted his head, then looked at the boat. "I guess we're going to have to steal the boat then. I've sent my knight, and it's true, there's a fog not far from here. It also messes with your mind in a way that makes you lose your sense of direction." He brought out the flute, "Meaning once you get in, you might not be able to get out. The boat is the best option I can see right now. Since you're not coming, Ken and I will handle it. You've done your part. Now." Godfrey tried blowing the flute while staring at Kenji's house. Although the melody was far from perfect, he expected a reaction. His senses were high. He would be able to notice an abrupt movement from Kenji, but nothing happened. Instead, the man calmly walked out of his house. Godfrey lowered the flute. "He's not infected." Ken and Emma heard his whisper and heaved a sigh of relief. Kenji walked past them straight to the boat they planned to steal. He dropped a small sack in the middle section that had 4 columns and a thatched roof. "Are we going or not?" Emma blinked in disbelief. What?" Ken nodded softly, glanced at Emma, and began to walk toward the boat. "Will you stay or follow us?" Godfrey asked. "You already know my answer. I've done my job." He smiled at her response, then stretched out his hand. I don't know how we would have found this place without you. Thank you. Imas shook his hand. Kill the boss and come back, King of Summoners. I don't want to see the dawn of ascension without you too. Godfrey chuckled as he turned. I thought you didn't like Ken. He cut your throat. I haven't forgotten that, and both of you will have to give me a proper reason. Something definitely happened, but it might distract us from the main objective. I'll be waiting here. Imas replied. Godfrey responded with a nod, then walked toward the boat, but Imas suddenly held his sleeve. Is there any chance that you can leave your dragon knight here? I don't think he'll be any good in a place where flight isn't allowed. Don't push your luck, Imas. Godfrey continued walking. He tilted his head and saw her looking around, then blinked. Not Kane, he whispered inwardly, realizing it may seem Imas had a phobia of being alone, but her fear of water seemed to be greater than her fear of being alone. Could that be why she was pissed off when they left her in the dust? Now that he thought about it, Isolde barely had any fear of anything. How could she? She had faced everything that could cause fear in her expeditions as a child. Darkness, loneliness, bugs, wounds, maybe insanity. She had borne it all. Was she really okay? Imas somehow reminded him of Isolde. The difference was that Isolde had the power to back up her claims and didn't really wear her emotions on her sleeve because of her position, but their egos and sassy attitudes might just be at the same level. When Godfrey got to the boat, Kenji came down and started pushing it. He looked at Godfrey and Ken. I need help. Godfrey approached the boat, placed his palm on it, and with a light movement, it shot into the ocean. He grabbed Kenji, leaped high, and landed on the boat. Ken landed right after him. Are you really spirits? Kenji asked with wide, bulging eyes. Just demigods. Godfrey sat down. Take us to Take the Island. The last phase of their journey began. Godfrey and Ken sat in the boat as it traversed the Black Sea. As the land slightly faded into the distance, they were welcomed by a grayish-black fog. Godfrey looked around. Right now, the fog around them was light, so he could still see, and the sun was just setting, but up ahead was a massive, endless fog looming with such oppressive might. They slowly grew closer and closer until they were beneath the fog. At that moment, there was no more sun. Darkness engulfed the entire place, and the lantern at the front of the boat became their only source of light. Ken stood up, staring at the fog that looked like the clouds were just above their heads. He leaped, vanishing into the fog, then landed. When Godfrey saw Ken shaking his head, he frowned. I can see it wasn't a good experience. I felt lost, Ken responded. I even forgot that I jumped. It's like being in a dream. It all seems real to you until you're out. That's, Ken sat down. A very uncomfortable experience. Godfrey nodded. I see, that's why Ballista couldn't return. He turned to Kenji. How long will it take for us to get to the island? 3 days, Kenji replied. How long has this demon been here? Ken asked. It's been 12 years now. I was 20 when it came. I'm 32 now. Ken wrote down Kenji's reply in his diary. Then he found a comfortable spot and flipped through his past pages, where he drew the village they went to, the monster Godfrey killed, and the two-faced lady. All these black sketches had notes all around them. Take the Island is where the main boss resides. A certain fog hides this island, and it can make anyone anymore, even a demigod, lose their senses. Once in, no one can remember their way out or how they got there. Highly dangerous, exceptional for protection. After writing, he began to sketch the fog. Time trickled by. The boat moved through the water in silence. Ken glanced at Godfrey and saw him under the thatched roof, leaning on a column, his eyes closed. He flipped the pages of his diary back to where he wrote Godfrey Daniels. Godfrey Daniels is more complicated than what I've heard. From his statements, he can be considered to be the type that cares but might be at the verge of breaking due to unknown traumas. Ken lowered his pen. Although I'm stuck between my duty to my nation and my morals, the true question is, Will I remain me if I kill him? And if I don't, what happens to my patriotism? His eyes flickered. I fight for our nation because I love my motherland. I know not everyone is good. The government might be corrupt for all I care, but I can't abandon the people to them. If I can make a difference, I will. Ken remembered his older brother's words. I will too. He remembered his young voice. It echoed in his ears like he had just said it. Will the people of Japan benefit if Godfrey Daniels dies? He knows Kane, and Kane said they were the same. After writing down this part, he paused, his pen trembling. Seasick, Godfrey's voice rang, forcing Ken to lift up his head and turn back. He was at the front of the boat, Kenji was at the back, while Godfrey sat in the middle. He thought he was sleeping, but Ken wasn't so sure anymore. I'm not, I just have a question. Let me guess, it's about Kane. The moment Godfrey said that, Ken turned and sat facing him. What does he mean by both of you are the same? Godfrey didn't answer. He shut his eyes, and when it seemed like he wasn't going to say a word, Ken turned away. I'm telling you this because I don't want us to fight. I've killed so many people. I really don't want to kill more. Ken tilted his head. Godfrey's eyes were open once more. He stared at the thatched roof. There are selected beings in each world. They're called favored ones, chosen ones, and fortunate ones. You see, fortunate ones have the greatest numbers, and you might be one of them. Then there are chosen ones and favored ones, both of whom have a more direct relationship with the mana tree. Kane is a favored one. He isn't bound by laws, but I'm a chosen one. I'm bound by burdens. Godfrey tilted his head toward him. Now that you know the basics, Kane isn't a human being. He wasn't one of the life forms created during the dawn of life when all creations were formed, and neither was I. Ken frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I don't know about Kane, but in my case, my mother is the mana tree. The being that created this dungeon we're in gave you that summon, mana itself. I don't know what else to call it. It got a body on Earth and produced her best experiment yet, me. You see, Ken, my life has been planned before my birth. My enemy's allies. The only thing she wants of me is to become something never seen before. I either do that or die and become a summon for Kane. That's the summary of my life. Elating, isn't it? I'm the son of the most powerful concept. He forced a smile. I guess being chosen is always fun. Ken was beyond shocked, but he could feel the sadness beneath every word Godfrey spoke. I mean, you feel a bit of the same, your leg. When Godfrey said that, Ken looked at his right leg. I guess strength doesn't really have a cost. It just changes things. Every state, weak, strong, poor, or rich, has a problem. We're just carrying ours. Ken released his grip on the katana he had been holding all this time. This place was the only place he had the advantage of winning against Godfrey, but he was giving it up. However, in the next moment, a centipede latched onto his back. Ken lunged to his feet, ripped the centipede off his armor, and plunged his katana through its head. Godfrey also rose to his feet as he saw centipedes emerging from every side of the boat, and more were beginning to show their backs on the surface of the Black Sea. Below the boat, thousands of centipedes. Some were small, some were a little bigger, others had enormous sizes that could strike enough fear to kill a man. All of them were heading for the boat. Suddenly, a bright golden light shone as Solstice appeared on the boat. Tempest and Toria joined him. Toria activated her golden light state and became a beacon of light, scaring away the darkness and revealing the centipedes hundreds of meters all around their boat. Ken also summoned Asahi. Kenji snapped out of his shock and yelled, "Enough! This boat can't carry any more weight. If there's a storm, you have to send them back to wherever you brought them from or we will sink." A droplet of water struck his face. Then more fell from above. Kenji's hands almost trembled when he heard the distant sound of thunder rumbling in the clouds above. But then his eyes went to Solstice, who stood at the forefront of the boat in his half-dragon state. He breathed flames from his mouth and his two hands. It didn't just burn the centipedes before them, it also vaporized a great portion of water. Unfortunately, it was near impossible to dry up a sea. On the right flank, Tempest launched his dual-bladed greatsword and watched the weapon spin on the surface of the sea like a Beyblade, crackling with lightning. While the blade itself sliced through a lot of centipedes, the lightning electrocuted the water, killing a great number of them. A rune lit up in his gauntlet. It was the pull rune, but specialized for his weapon. It forced the dual-bladed greatsword out of the water after it had lost its momentum, back into his hand. Tempest caught the sword with a grunt. Then Spartan kicked a huge centipede that had just burst out of the water right beside the boat. He pulled out his spear and stabbed the falling centipede. When he noticed more were still coming, Tempest looked at Godfrey. Godfrey was ensuring Kenji wasn't infected and kept the boat from tilting with his telekinetic skill. "I shall free you of this burden, my king." After saying that, Tempest shot upward. Godfrey had already informed them about the fog. The moment he entered the fog, Tempest vanished, but suddenly the ear-splitting crackle of a lightning bolt pierced the air. The silhouette of a being with tendril wings flickered in the gray fog for a split moment. Then thick bolts of lightning fell from above. They struck the water all around the boat. The sea became restless, water splashed and poured into the boat, but Godfrey kept it floating while Kenji kept it in the right direction. With great thunderous sounds, lightning kept falling, incinerating centipedes into nothing, but ash while Ken and Asahi moved as one within the boat. Their katanas sliced through water droplets before cutting the tough heads of centipedes that had managed to enter the boat. "The rain is getting heavier," Godfrey said after retrieving Tempest. "How long will this last?" "I don't know, days." Days? Godfrey's eyes narrowed. He would run out of mana before a day at this point. Ken couldn't also cut down centipedes for days without rest. He retrieved Toria and summoned Mountain, who entered the golden light state and transformed his shield into a dome. Then he retrieved Solstice. His mana was dropping and fast. He barely had over a month's worth now. And that was one huge skill away from being drained. Unfortunately, his dome didn't seem able to go around the entire boat. It only protected the sides and left the bottom exposed. Mountain's dome was meant to be a mobile one. It was meant for the battlefield, and from the look of things, Mountain might have never fought on water before. If he did, this flaw would have been noted. Fortunately, the centipedes didn't try to force themselves through the boat's bottom. They just slammed themselves against the golden barrier. "Why aren't they ripping this boat open from below?" Ken asked. Kenji shook his head. "I have no idea." Ken looked around. "Or the demon doesn't want them to break boats because this is the only means of transportation. If he's transporting something like those messengers, he wouldn't want their boats destroyed." "That could be it." Godfrey wiped his face. His hair stuck to his face due to the rain, which was now blocked away by Mountain's shield barrier. "As much as I love this relief, that man in armor weighs too much, and the centipedes are pushing against us. It will take us a week at minimum to get to the island if it goes on like this." "Asahi will handle it," Ken said as his summon stood where Solstice once stood, and began to unleash massive fiery mana slashes. As the samurai's slashes went through the great numbers of centipedes blocking them, the boat began to pick up speed once more. Like this, 6 hours went by, and the centipedes weren't their main problem anymore. The downpour had become fierce, with great winds pushing the water current. The waves were manageable at first, but as time went by, they grew bigger and bigger. As the boat rose over a wave and slammed into the water's surface, everyone jerked, but a much bigger wave reflected in Godfrey's golden irises. He stretched forth his hand, unleashing a telekinetic force that tore the wave apart. It fell like a curtain, revealing the chaotic sea ahead. "Brace yourself," he whispered, as if to himself, as he began slapping away one wave after another with telekinesis. Some were so massive, he had to use his hands to rip them apart. Ken and Kenji watched him flatten waves like he was some god of the ocean, but Godfrey felt his hope depleting. All this took mana. At one point, he might have to retrieve Mountain. And so minutes became hours, and hours eventually became a day. An entire day on the Black Sea, below an endless gray cloud, in a small boat constantly being battered by the waves. Another day went by. The sail had torn twice, and had to be stitched back by Kenji, while he and Ken controlled the boat based on what he told them. After 2 days, Ken sat exhausted. The constant movement and jerking had taken their toll on him, and worse, the cold made his right leg worse. This storm might be fierce, but it's the worst I've seen. We've witnessed tsunamis hundreds of feet high crashing into fleets. There are thousands of ships beneath the Black Sea, Kenji said as he stood beside Godfrey. We made sacrifices most times, but you were able to control the waves with your hands. It's the first time I've met demigods, and I don't even know what to think. Kenji continued speaking when he noticed Godfrey might not respond. He looked at the waves. If both of you had been there that day, Clan Taekta would not have fallen. I would not have lost my father and my mother. His voice softened to a whisper. We would have never been here if the demon had not arrived in the first place, Godfrey responded softly. That's true, Kenji sighed. Right then, a soft melody flowed into Godfrey's ears. It made him involuntarily shut his eyes like a man who yearned for the embrace of peace. The flute. Godfrey's eyes went wide and his neck snapped to his left, but Kenji grabbed his head, and a red-backed centipede, as thick as an adult's forearm, crawled out of his back with great speed that no centipede so far had ever shown. Kenji had grabbed his hair with one hand and his mouth with the other as this centipede lunged for Godfrey's mouth. It all happened in a split second. Godfrey also threw a punch, reacting almost instinctively. Your Majesty, Mountain couldn't even get those words out in his mind as a mighty wave crashed into the boat. Right at the moment Godfrey's focus was taken away, the rage of the sea crashed upon them. The boat and everyone were buried in the Black Sea. It seemed like Godfrey had just blinked. One moment he was on the boat, and now he was in the sea. Mountain's bright light revealed the centipedes all around them. 2 had already wrapped around Mountain, and many were heading for him. One small centipede moved right above his face. Godfrey retrieved Mountain instantly and propelled himself out of the water, but just as he burst out of the water, another wave struck, forcing him back down. He fell back into the water and this time fell deep, seeing pieces of the boat above him. It was at this moment Godfrey remembered Ken. Ken! He saw glimpses of fiery light on a large piece of wood above. That had to be Ken. But he was now in the embrace of centipedes. There were thousands of them all around, and they were quickly blocking out the light at the surface. He quickly formed a sun ball and launched it. It blew apart a great portion, spreading centipede blood, but there were still many more. These centipedes were endless. Much bigger ones came from the dark depths, reaching out for him like they were saying there was no need to struggle anymore. With no other choice, Godfrey summoned Solstice, Tempest, and Toria. They quickly unleashed massive firepower and lightning at their greatest capacity, giving him the space to swim out of their confined space while his knights were swallowed. Godfrey never thought anything would ever force him to do something like this, to sacrifice others on his behalf. Toria's blue phoenix petal bloomed, sweeping out with intense heat, followed by Solstice's countless mini-suns. The heat and light were so intense they lit up the Black Sea. At the tail end of his mana, Godfrey had to swim to the top, but when he got there, the surface of the Black Sea was dark. There was nothing but scattered wooden planks. Ken! He looked around. Lightning struck the sea, revealing an incoming wave. When Godfrey turned, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was tall, taller than anything he had ever seen. This wasn't a wave, it was a tsunami. The restless sea had taken out Ken, and now, as the lightning struck, he saw countless centipedes in this tsunami. To Godfrey, it was the biggest he had ever seen, but he had little clue this tsunami was over 2,000 feet tall and stretched over a massive distance. He had two choices: teleport back to land with the last of his mana or endure and push forward, since he might lose this opportunity forever. In a flash of purple light, Godfrey vanished and appeared over 500 feet into the air. He found himself in the gray fog with no idea how he got there. He teleported once more. With no idea of how high or how far he could go due to the fog, he crossed the 1,500-foot mark. Right then, the wave slammed into him, and Godfrey blacked out. In the capital of Greece, a man dressed in a black suit opened the door to an office, and another man with broad shoulders all covered beneath his suit walked in. Two spiral black horns curled from both sides of his head, and his draconic eyes, gleaming softly, settled on Mrs. Athens, who sat behind a desk. She lifted up her head as he sat down. Mrs. Athens smiled. "We meet. You've all bound me to an oath, forcing me to be unable to speak about what is going on in the dungeon on the moon. Technology that can override summons being built by humanoid summons is something I never believed this council could hide." Arthur leaned back, then muttered, "How can we enslave the very people that keep our technology relevant?" Mrs. Athens pursed her lips. "Even we heads are bound to the oaths that govern the council. Whatever is going on is bigger than what we can control, so some of us had to go along with it. Until your daughter awakened an elf. Countless other elf summoners have been locked up and their summons sent to infiltrate other worlds." Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly. "They're stronger. Humanoid summons are inherently better than beast summons. They teach their summoners, make them enlightened about how large the world truly is. They can learn faster than beasts. Over 1 billion of them are still under our program. They will strip from them, their minds manipulated. This is slavery." "Arthur," Mrs. Athens raised her voice, although it was tinged with guilt, "I said I will openly show my support. I'm willing to offer my support before the other heads, so just stop." Arthur nodded slowly. "I'm just exercising my frustration since I can't speak of this without dying on the spot." When he said that, Mrs. Athens's shoulders relaxed. "What's the secret you said we had to meet in person to discuss?" "It's about Cain." "Cain?" Mrs. Athens raised an eyebrow. "I've discovered that Cain has clones. There was one in this council, the previous Mr. Manhattan. I believe there might be one more in this council." Mrs. Athens straightened her back. "What if I'm the clone, Mr. Manhattan?" Arthur chuckled. "You might doubt my intelligence for telling you this when anyone could possibly be the clone amongst us, but look at it this way. What if we're all clones?" "What?" "Well, his clones can live a life of their choice, have families, personalities, maybe even be after Cain himself. Imagine that. Our reality has been shattered by one man. He keeps everyone in check with fear, using the authorities to enforce what he wants. Cain fears trust. So I'll become trust, knowing fully well it can get me killed." Arthur stared straight into Mrs. Athens' eyes. "This is a fight for the next generation. While the world is submerged in darkness, let's work to deal with this poison, at least expose him before the sun graces our eyes once more." "Is that so?" A deep voice rang out. Arthur and Mrs. Athens tilted their heads to their left. Standing by the wall was a black shadowy being with crimson eyes. His shadowy form slowly gained more definition, until a man with long black hair and a physique so perfect endless words could be spent describing it, appeared. He wore a simple white top and black pants, but the cocky smirk on his lips brought a chill to Mrs. Athens' heart. Wasn't that the man she thought was dead? As she quickly reached out for a button to call her security, Cain chuckled. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Trust me on this one." Mrs. Athens's finger froze. Arthur rose to his feet. From what he saw from Mrs. Athens, she didn't plan this. Was she a clone and had informed Cain of his arrival? What exactly would Cain gain from coming here? To kill him in Mrs. Athens' office? This could lead to a lot of problems that could affect both nations. Was that Cain's plan? "Oh, stop thinking you're wrong," Cain said as he slowly approached Arthur. For the first time, Arthur, who was 67, felt short. Cain was an entire head taller than him, but was dressed like a simple office worker. "Honestly, I find this interesting," Cain smirked. "I truly am favored." Suddenly, Arthur launched his hand through Cain's chest. His chest dissolved into white smoke and formed right back. "I'm not here. You see, I am a god king now, and I'm working hard to get to the next tier. One interesting thing about this tier is that it gives you a skill called the rule of law." He smirked. "A law is engraved into your heart. When I saw mine, I jumped like a child. For the first time, this world understands me and saw fit to let me place my law over this entire world." Cain sat down on Arthur's chair. "By the authority of the crown, this shall be law. All who whisper my name shall behold me." His grin widened. "Of course, you would never get to experience what it means to be a god king. I wouldn't have known you knew this much. I'm curious, where did I slip?" "Go ahead and kill me. Get done with it, Cain, but hear this and hear it well. This world you've built will break, it will crumble, and not even the crumbles will be spared if you kill me. Why? Because you'll be facing Godfrey." Arthur snickered. "We both know he's barely hanging on to reality. All that power that he has, imagine what happens when he's without control. At least with me." "It won't be that horrible." Cain crossed his leg. "Is that all? You don't know what's in that young man. You don't want to find out." "Once he's done dealing with innocent people," Cain smiled. "What if he doesn't care? You'll break him, that I know without a doubt, but from there on out, you'll be facing what you don't know and will never want to know. He's what you threaten me with. I am 3 times better than what he will ever be." Cain frowned but couldn't shake off what Arthur said. There had to be a root to this confidence, something that had escaped his sight. With his law in action, he would find out soon. But for now, Arthur had just bought himself more time, or might have become bait to gather the whole prize. Cain faded. On the calm surface of a seemingly endless black sea, and beneath a mass of gray fog that hung like the clouds were just a dozen feet above the sea, a man lying on a broken piece of wood, large enough to carry his upper body, opened his eyes. Eyes. Godfrey could only let out short gasps as he reached out for his left eye and grabbed 2 centipedes. They had eaten his left eyeball. As he grabbed the small centipedes and crushed them, he noticed the tails or heads of some centipedes were protruding from his forearm. Godfrey couldn't even look down to realize his body had become a nest. There were hundreds, small and medium-sized, all around and inside him. Lying there on the plank, only short gasps left his lips. His shock couldn't even be expressed. His remaining right eye, wide open, stared into the darkness. He had no idea how long he had been unconscious. Then a word left his lips. It was soft, almost fleeting. "Ken." "I had a feeling. The ruination dungeons I saw never end well. I learnt my lesson. I refused to bring my friends, so why do I still feel this pain? How much more, no matter the preparation, it almost changes nothing. The pain keeps repeating and repeating, carving wounds that haven't healed right open." An intense itch flared up throughout his entire body. It was so intense, Godfrey's resistance to scratching the itch made the veins swell and throb in his right eye as a tear streamed down. If there's a God above it all, someone above it all, please just close this chapter, let it stop. He was about to close his eyes when something hit the plank. Godfrey tilted his head. It was pitch black everywhere, but he reached out and grabbed it. It was Ken's helmet. His eye flashed. Isolde, his parents, his friends, Arthur, Paradise, Then a soft chuckle left his lips. I can't believe it. It never crossed my mind that one day I would give up. I've lost an eye, I'm infected, so I'll keep living as a host for these centipedes until they grow big enough to rip me into nothing but chunks of meat. This looks like fate. His inner voice died out. Silence and darkness drowned him, a small, inconsequential man in a vast sea, beneath a vast fog that spanned countless miles. Fate, no, 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 no. I refuse to end this way. You should have let me drown, but now, even if it's just one eye, as long as it's open, I refuse to die. Godfrey dragged his legs onto the plank and saw centipedes latched around his shins. They were slowly carving their way deep into his flesh. Blood gushed out, but he couldn't even feel the pain. His breathing was rough, but then he began to laugh. It takes madness to survive being you, Godfrey Daniels. It won't hurt if I lose it a bit. The death of his knights had dried up whatever mana he had, and would not even allow him to gain any mana, because it would keep absorbing it to revive them. Fortunately, his 3 cores could absorb mana while he was asleep, and a dungeon had more mana density than Earth, leaving him with a little. His cores were absorbing, his castle was taking. Godfrey knew he couldn't rip out all the centipedes without killing himself. Some were even too small for him to get, and they could be anywhere in his body right now. He used Lament's adaptive skill that allowed his body to become fire, but Godfrey quickly realized it was actually his clothing that transformed. So his clothes became fire and the centipedes dug deeper. This time he felt the pain, but the fire was unable to kill them. Godfrey knew some centipedes would gain resistance to certain fire. Lament's fire wasn't special despite its fancy name. Solstice's fire couldn't reach inside him without killing him, and right now, Solstice had not been revived. There was only one choice left. Godfrey summoned Toria, who had been revived, and activated Eclipsal State, a Paragon tier skill. After Toria fused with him, and Godfrey transformed into a unique being with golden armor and white hair, he monitored the flow of mana being absorbed by his 3 cores. They gave as much as 3 people meditating. He would have to reroute this mana to purge himself using a skill he had seen the Blue Phoenix use. His eyes became blue, and he started with his left hand. It cracked and began to transform into an arm made of blue flames. All the centipedes there were incinerated instantly. The process continued, with Godfrey struggling to withstand the pain. It wasn't as bad as his flesh and bones turning into fire, but the little heat he felt forced him to grimace in silence. However, when he got to his shoulder, his eclipsal state broke down. There wasn't enough mana to retain his connection to the soul space, so his castle was cut off. And so, his left arm faded away right before Godfrey's remaining eye. He had lost an arm. In Fukushima, a woman wearing transparent spectacles stared at the television, her arms crossed, her eyes burning into the screen. It's been 9 days. 11 days since I sent them into that dungeon, and there has been no feedback. Are they dead? Mrs. Fukushima almost cursed as she turned, and slammed her palm into the wall with a loud screech. She panted and shook her head several times. This couldn't be happening. Just how did she get into this tight spot? Reports were flying in. Shibuya reeked of the smell of burnt people. According to the last estimate, over 1 million people were infected, and at least half of them were dead, and the number of infected and dead increased by the minute. Statistics showed that at least 1,000 people were infected every 20 minutes. This meant 72,000 people would be infected and swarming with centipede eggs by the end of today. Her breath shook. Her plot to blame it all on Godfrey swiftly collapsed now that people knew he had already gone into the dungeon. They were actively seeking someone else to blame. Of course, people always sought a target, and the Minister of Defense. A man she thought would remain silent had appeared on the news, stating she delayed Godfrey's arrival. He also revealed she had fled Tokyo and returned to Fukushima. Red veins throbbed in her eyes as she stared at the television with Haruto's face on it. Her assistant walked in. "What is it?" Mrs. Fukushima snapped. "The tracker, Ima, has returned to Tokyo, and it might seem Godfrey Daniels and Ken Asahi failed to kill the boss." Mrs. Fukushima's anger cleared up a bit. Light returned to her eyes and she gasped like a woman who had found clean air. "This is good. Godfrey Daniels is dead. Are you certain about that?" "He went into the sea with Ken and didn't return. Emma said she found the badly eaten corpse of the man who took them. She also said they found a civilization in the dungeon that was like ancient Japan." Mrs. Fukushima waved her hand. "We have no use for any civilization at this moment. Ken's demise is a great loss to the nation, but—" Her eyes gleamed. "I can gain the favor of the other heads once I tell them Godfrey Daniels is dead. Finally, I thought that the golden roach would never meet his end in a dungeon." She laughed a bit, then smiled. Her troubled heart finally found peace. Even if 2 million people died, it was worth making sure Godfrey didn't see another day. She couldn't shake off this feeling that the young man would shatter the power of the government if they let him. Whatever king he saw himself as must, and will bow to the authorities to survive. Unfortunately, Godfrey didn't want to abide by those rules and still wanted to remain visible. If he chose to be a hermit like most powerful summoners, then she wouldn't have had him in her thoughts. How long has it been?" A golden-haired man sitting on a plank as it rained questioned himself internally. It was always dark. He didn't know when the sun came up or went down, but time had passed. Was it hours, days, weeks? It couldn't be weeks. It had to be a few days, or was it just a few hours that seemed so long? He had been focused on meditating. While all 3 cores absorbed mana, he retained it in his core while allowing just enough to keep his connection to the soul space. If he allowed his mana to flow freely, it would all drain into his soul space, and his nights would still not be revived. From what he had deciphered, it took all that he had left, and a few days of his time unconscious to revive Toria. Toria, I promised her greatness, not being sacrificed in the belly of centipedes in the depths of a dark sea. His lips moved a bit as he mumbled. In these 4 days, Godfrey felt his mindset shift. Guilt plagued him. The pain, the shame he felt deep within for sacrificing his nights to save himself. He let them go through what he didn't want to go through. Godfrey knew it had to be done, but that didn't erase the deep, sharp pains in his heart. For hours non-stop, he had tried convincing himself to no avail. At this point, he wanted to rip out his heart. What was wrong with it? Why couldn't his heart understand the reason? Why couldn't it see that he had no choice, there was no other way? Plagued with pain, with thirst, with starvation, Godfrey was finally testing the limits of a demigod's sustainability. He had no idea, but it had been 9 days since he last ate or drank anything. The cold in dungeons was made to be able to affect anyone of any tier unless there was a skill resistant to it. Under constant rain, under the constant torment of centipedes crawling within his insides and even his face, under the plague of his stupid conscience and his fuzzy vision, Godfrey felt himself slipping. Floating in this darkness, listening to nothing but silence with the burden of losing an eye and an arm, it felt even worse. It felt like this had always been his reality. Every single moment felt like eternity. Sometimes he thought he felt centipedes moving through his lost arm. He was desolate. After days of hanging on, of holding it all together, Godfrey began to question it all. What was the reason for holding on to his mortality in this endless darkness? What use was feeling bad? What use was feeling desolate? What was the benefit of all this? A subtle thought struck him, informing him that he was a step away from insanity. So what? Godfrey frowned as his right eye gleamed. This pain he felt from Ken's demise, he best let it out. There was no use holding it in. Now, only one voice echoed in his mind. Get to that island and kill every living, breathing thing. Whatever so much as gasps will find breath in another life. And this sea would not stop him. No, it just couldn't. Nothing could stop his madness. He activated Eclipsal State, and this time with his right eye glinting with insane light, he transformed his entire body. With a piercing roar, his body dissolved into liquid fire. The centipedes and the wooden plank all burnt to nothing as steam rose from the Black Sea. Your Majesty. Zaun's voice rang in Godfrey's hazy mind. His eyes adjusted to where he was, and he found himself in a hallway, standing before the immortal armor's door. Before it stood the chief alchemist, who tilted his head when he saw Godfrey standing before him, naked, without an arm and an eye. "So you can summon me," Godfrey said. "This isn't the first time we've done it. Our status in the Order grants us great advantage, surpassing you in almost every aspect except might." Zaun turned, and, with a gentle push of his hand, the huge door bulged and swung inward, revealing a massive hollowed-out space that looked like it was hewn out of a cave, with towering pillars placed to hold the rocky ceiling. In this vast hall stood what was once the Crimson Towdy army. Now, all 50,000 of them, the footmen, all with their ornate broad axes, and the horsemen with their towering spears that once had crimson cloth tied close to the spearhead, were now coated with gold. Their once crimson armor glistened with dull gold. They stood there like menacing statues. Suddenly there was a light step. Something metallic tapped the ground, and the Towdy army separated, creating a long path. At the end of the path was the immortal armor, but the armor wasn't crimson anymore, but golden. It walked straight toward Godfrey, then tilted its head. "What do you think of my new color? These alchemists can be quite persuasive, but I must say I don't hate this color." It sighed when Godfrey said nothing, then stretched out its hand. "All this feeling swirling inside of you makes this the perfect time for you to give me a name. I met my first in a similar state. My dreams haven't changed regardless of my state. I will name you Imperial." The immortal armor froze when Godfrey was expecting it to laugh. "That was my first name," the immortal armor said after a while, then covered Godfrey's body, and some metal pieces pierced Godfrey's left shoulder, drawing blood into the armor. "This is a blood contract. It's supposed to allow you to use one of my arms as yours, courtesy of your alchemist freaks." They took the mana contract one step further. When Godfrey heard that, he looked at his left hand. It was just armor from the pauldrons down to the gauntlets, but when he moved, the fingers of the gauntlets moved. It moved as his mind ordered it. Godfrey clenched his prosthetic arm. Until he returned to paradise, he would wield this arm of an immortal armor as his own. Then he turned to the alchemist. "The immortal armor is a relic, the mana system of Generation Zero. So how did you alter it without destroying the foundation of its existence?" Zaun lifted his right hand. His wide sleeve fell, revealing his right arm. Then he lifted his left, and what Godfrey saw was golden metal in the shape of an arm. An arm for an arm. It was an exchange to keep the integrity of the armor. "It doesn't matter what you lose now. The entire armor is a prosthesis better than the original," Zaun replied, then smiled a bit. "It also granted us access into the other worlds. Our knowledge is no longer restricted. When you're ready, we shall speak to you about the 10 ascended worlds, their civilizations, and mana systems." Godfrey nodded slowly. "I finally understand one burden of a king. Your pain isn't yours to bear alone. Your loss is also the loss of others. I'll make sure I do not allow another loss. When I return, Zaun, when I return." As he walked out of the hall with dull metallic steps, he vanished. At the shores of Take-Da Island, 30 samurai in black armor and helmets sat on horseback, while an army of 100 men with light armor and large pauldrons stood behind them with yari spears. Leading them on the back of a stalwart horse clad in black scale-like armor, with a row of horns along its long neck, was the daimyo. He wore a red mask with a mustache and stood at the forefront of the troop, staring at the foggy shorelines of the Black Sea. The sea was quite calm, with waves washing up on the shore and retreating back. It all looked peaceful, but the demon, the true controller of this island for 12 years, had ordered all the island's forces to assemble. They had camped the night before and gathered here this morning. The sun was still at rest. The aura of this troop was terrifying. The daimyo had the aura of a peak-level progenitor. His samurai had the power of that same tier, all gained from becoming hosts of the demon's centipedes. Their infantry were paragons, an army of 130, powerful enough to frighten a demigod and slaughter any daring one, awaited with grim light in their eyes. According to the report, what they were going to face was a monster even the demon was cautious of. It had even boosted their strength by infecting them with the blue-backed centipede, right from the mother centipede demon's chosen eggs. The daimyo squinted when he spotted something in the fog, a tiny golden light. It was too tiny but had this piercing intensity that couldn't be ignored. As it grew closer, the daimyo and his entire army were in shock to discover a human silhouette. It kept growing closer, and they discovered that piercing light was the glow from this being's one eye. This golden-armored being stood on a block of ice. "Get back to the sea where you belong, ghost." The daimyo drew his katana and swung it, unleashing a sharp wave of water. Godfrey leaned to his side, evading the mana slash. A long sword grew out of his right hand. It was made by Imperial. A loud splash filled their ears as Godfrey shot forward, forming ice before his foot touched the water. Then he leaped. Godfrey quickened his somersaulting speed, making it seem like he was some kind of golden wheel. With that speed, he split through the daimyo and his mount. Then he swung his longsword, spinning himself fiercely. The mounts of all 30 samurai lost their heads. Harnessing Lysander's agility, Godfrey empowered himself further with lightning, flickered around, hacking his sword through armor and flesh alike. The last samurai, who had lost his legs, crawled back as Godfrey followed him with slow steps before plunging his longsword into the samurai's face. Flames burst out, engulfing the corpses. As he slowly pulled it out, his one eye locked on the infantry, whose feet were frozen to the wet sand. Each samurai was worth more than 10 of them. So, what in God's name was this monster before them? Godfrey placed the blade of his sword against his folded left prosthetic arm, right at his elbow, and drew it out, cleaning off the sticky blood while maintaining eye contact with the infantry. "No need to be afraid. Come at me as soldiers or die running. You'll die regardless. You defy me." A soft voice echoed in Kane's ears as he suddenly found himself before a tree whose size was too absurd for description to justify. The height of its roots before the trunk was over 35,000 feet tall, which meant only the roots could be spotted below the clouds. This wasn't an imagination, it was what an ancient god could see. Lesser beings saw what couldn't even be considered a fraction of the tree's true size. It could be said the mana tree wrapped around all worlds. "Defy you," Kane folded his arms. "I never obeyed you to begin with. You are just a spawn. I created you, entertained your antics and ambitions. I allowed your deception, but it would seem you are just a fool whose ego is 1,000 times his size." Kane chuckled when he heard that. "Return to that dungeon, and ensure Godfrey Daniels does not emerge." When Kane heard that, he chuckled. "If staying out of this means I break out of your shackles of control, then I will stay out. Let the game continue, let the stakes be high. That's when true evolution is born." There was a short period of silence. "I created the chosen ones because I wanted to know. Can responsibility create the greatest being? I made the fortunate ones because I wanted to know, can greatness arise without better opportunities? Can the piece worthy of being discarded change the future? Then come the favored ones. What happens if someone is given overwhelming freedom and power? It sounded like they would become the greatest. They had all the qualities and no burdens. However, I have discovered time and time again the madness of creation, a weakness that is embedded too deep. You, a free man, burden yourself with matters. You and the other have chained yourselves to ambitions that have blinded your sight. You seek to control a chosen world. The other seeks to annihilate all that is not from his home world. This I can allow, but when you receive word from me and blatantly reject it, I will no longer indulge your madness. You don't get to tell me when to harvest my plant. Earth is my farm. Thank you for all you've done, but the rest is mine, Cain responded. Godfrey will gain the ability to become an ancient god after this dungeon. Once that happens, you won't be dealing with what can be controlled anymore. Cain tilted his head. Godfrey's end remains the same, but this step I will allow. I like it when you sound shaken. I guess your experiments have gone out of control. Whatever Godfrey was going to become, he would deal with it. And if it proved to be too much, he would simply run and live to fight another day. There was no big deal, for at last the shackles of control finally had a crack. Cain found himself back in the sanctuary. He squinted. However, what exactly was Godfrey going to become? Arg! One of the infantry from the hundred saw Godfrey brutally cut down 10 of his comrades and lunged forward with a loud war cry. Godfrey tilted toward him. The man's Yari spear jammed Imperial, then the soldier pulled it back and kept stabbing, but at last the wood shattered. You have honor, Godfrey muttered. The soldier took 2 shaky steps backward, hastily reached out for a dagger and pulled it out. He lunged for Godfrey's throat, but his dagger just couldn't pierce through the armor. However, Godfrey felt the impact of the blow and without a signal, slapped off the man's head. Driving forward, Godfrey slammed his knee into another footman. The impact folded the soldier in half. Before the man could recover, an elbow crashed into his helmet, crushing steel and skull alike. At the rear of the formation, one soldier collapsed. Scrambling upright, he turned to flee. His feet never found the ground again. An invisible force pulled his head straight into Godfrey's left prosthetic arm. The soldier dangled from Godfrey's arm, his head crushed. 100 paragons wasn't a force to be dismissed, even for a demigod. But with the immortal armor which could not be damaged, his rage and mastery, Godfrey was certain he could decimate these soldiers. Boosting himself with Lysander's agility, he sliced through their ranks, hacking, slashing, and ripping people apart, even with a slap from his left hand. A minute later, he stood on a bloody battlefield littered with mangled corpses. His sword was deep within the chest of the last one. The soldier stared into his one eye, every muscle on his face trembling with pain. Monster! He whispered. Aren't we all? Godfrey pulled the sword upward, splitting the soldier's upper body. He leaned back, looked at his blood-stained golden armor, then faced the settlement up the hill. You seem off, Imperial spoke solemnly. I've seen this several times to know. Godfrey didn't respond. You're lost. I suggest you hide yourself until you deal with your emotions, or they clear off after you leave this dungeon, or what? Godfrey's voice was hoarse, each breath working his diaphragm, which had nothing to nourish it for 9 days. Imperial went silent. Godfrey went to the settlement and found a samurai sitting on a horse in the middle of the street. His right eye widened in shock at the sight. Ken. Asahi pointed at a rooftop. There, Ken sat on a rooftop holding a leaf he had been tearing apart, piece by piece. He wasn't wearing his armor anymore. Godfrey could see that one part of his face had been eaten off and was already rotting, while a centipede slowly moved as if breathing where his spinal cord was supposed to be. It bulged so much that even though Godfrey could only see Ken's side profile, that bulge was still visible. Ken tossed what was left of the leaf. He turned his head. You know, I was relieved when we fell. I thought to myself, at least I won't have to kill myself or go back and face Mrs. Fukushima's rage. She's done a lot for me. You won't get me to hate you with that. Godfrey's black sclera retreated, revealing white sclera and blue irises. When the boss pulled me out and I didn't see you, I just knew you were coming. And you did. You made an epic entrance. Ken chuckled. We've made it to the island. Once I kill the boss. I'll die, Ken interrupted. You see, I now have a centipede for a spinal cord and they've done quite the damage to my system. I'm only alive because, I can't die as long as they're in me. I'm even rotting. He rose to his feet. I am the gift the demon has sent you. I have been ordered by Mrs. Fukushima, the highest official in Japan, to take your life, but I won't. I won't fight you because of the demon's control or Mrs. Fukushima, but as one prodigy with another. I told you the star shines brightest when it's about to die. Honor me with one final duel. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.